What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we've got another live fantasy football mock draft back on ESPN with a 12-team PPR mock, and we have got that first overall pick. In fact, we are on the clock, so let's go ahead, not waste any more time, and make our first selection. And here, it gets pretty simple. Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley. We've said it before, we've got McCaffrey as our top overall guy. So we're going to waste very little time and go ahead and select him first overall. Now, there's going to be a little bit of a wait here until it gets back to us in that second and third round, but no worries. We're also going to go ahead and break down some of these selections, look at some of these other players. And before we do that, a quick reminder for everyone interested, go ahead, get yourself a copy of the 2020 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. It's got everything you could want at a great value, from top 150 overall player rankings and standard and PPR formats to individual player bios, tiers, projections, and general fantasy advice. Also, check us out online at alldaypigskin.com for some exclusive content. All the details are in the description. And as always, if you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe. But let's look at some of these other picks now. And as you can imagine, Saquon Barkley, that second pick, to nobody's surprise. And all of a sudden, I said to nobody's surprise, we've got a surprise just like that. Joe Mixon as a top 3 pick. Now, that's going to be one of those just weird one-off scenarios. I'll tell you that, obviously, right now, because even though Mixon is an RB1 and maybe in some people's eyes he's a bit undervalued, he shouldn't be a top 3 pick. It should be McCaffrey, Barkley, Zeke, Kamara, Dalvin Cook. You know, those guys are in the conversation. I'm shocked that Mixon went 3rd overall. In fact, I've done hundreds of mock drafts, and I think this is the first time I've ever seen Mixon go 3rd overall. Looking at some of these other players afterwards, we see Zeke, we see Kamara, we see Cook, Michael Thomas, sure. You know, looking at these rankings, I continue to point this out. I would focus on running back. I know Michael Thomas is the consensus #1 wide receiver. I get it, across all formats, coming off a historic season. But guys, just like every single other year, the running back position will dry out faster than you expect. And if in that first round you don't get a running back, you know, unless you're picking real early on in that 3rd round, the chances that you still have a high-end RB1 available to you are not all that high. That's the reason why you want to ensure at least one top-end running back pretty early on. So for that reason, I see that, you know, Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams go off the board back-to-back here. It wouldn't be what I do, but I understand why people do it. Again, this is a PPR format, so Michael Thomas does get a bump. But again, there's guys like a Kamara, like a Dalvin Cook. Obviously, they're off the board right now, but then you look at a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you look at a Sanders, you look at a Drake. In my eyes, I think you can make an argument that all those players should be ranked higher than a Michael Thomas and a Devontae Adams. Looking at what the remaining big board looks like, I'm actually kind of shocked to see DeAndre Hopkins ranked above Julio Jones in ESPN's rankings. Some people have got DeAndre Hopkins as their 5th overall wide receiver. You know, with Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, Julio, Tyreek, and then Hopkins. So that ADP on Hopkins is going to be a little bit different from platform to platform and league to league. So keep that in mind. There's going to be players like that, you know, not only at that wide receiver position early on, but later on as well. You know, a couple of names that come to mind are going to be guys like a Mike Evans, a guy like a Nick Chubb, someone like a James Conner later on. Because here you can see Mike Evans is ranked right below Chris Godwin, which is what we've pretty much been saying since day one of, you know, the offseason, that Evans and Godwin, sure, Godwin had a better season than him, but there's no reason why they shouldn't be 1A and 1B right after one another. Now, Miles Sanders just went off the board with that second pick in the second round, and let's just quickly recap these last couple of picks. So Julio Jones was that last pick in the first round, followed by Tyreek Hill and then Miles Sanders. So if I had to go ahead and, predict what players would be available to us, this is the tough part in a 12-team draft when you pick first overall. It's a good chance that those top end running backs, and when I say those top end running backs, I would say towards the end of the tier 2, tier 3 guys. So once you get to the Austin Ecklers, to the Aaron Joneses, that's where that final tier 3 group of running backs ends for me personally. My tier 1 list consists of CMC, of Zeke, of Barkley, Kamara, of Dalvin Cook, and then once you get into your tier 2 list, you've got guys like, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, a Kenyon Drake, maybe a Miles Sanders, and then you've got that tier 3 list where you're going to have an Aaron Jones and Austin Eckler, like we mentioned previously, and both those guys, funny enough, go off the board here. So Josh Jacobs went after Miles Sanders, and you see that run on running backs that we told you about, because for someone that didn't go running back in the first round, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 straight running backs in a row. After Jacobs, Kenyon Drake, then Nick Chubb, then Aaron Jones, then Austin Eckler. Even though I'm not the biggest Aaron Jones fan, I would still have him above Nick Chubb for what it's worth. I think that's worth pointing out. Austin Eckler as well gets that nice boost as a pass catcher. Chris Godwin now goes off the board. We'll see what we can go ahead and do here. I'm interested to see who will be available to us in 2 picks. I see a Mike Evans, I see a Kelsey, I see a Kenny Golladay, and Mike Evans just goes off the board. So we might just have to go a best player available, I'll be honest with you. And something that we haven't done is, go by an atypical approach. And what I mean by that is go tight end and quarterback early. So we could go ahead and theoretically do that here, because let's go ahead and take a look at all these positions, specifically the running back position. I don't feel all that good about selecting one of these guys with that last pick in the first round. Wide receivers, there's some cases to be made here, definitely. But I think right now we've gotten to a point where Travis Kelce is pretty good value. He's a wide receiver 1. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is, again, I don't go by this approach when it's my actual draft day, because I realize the importance of positional hierarchy and that running backs are king, followed by wide receiver. But I know that a lot of people nonetheless will go ahead and select a tight end in the second round. They'll select a quarterback potentially at the end of the second round, at the start of the third round. So let's go ahead and simulate that, and I'll just go ahead and go for broke. I will get Patrick Mahomes here, and I'm going to go ahead and have a stack of Mahomes and Kelsey. And then we've got Christian McCaffrey. So you could argue that we have got the top projected scoring players in 3 different positions in Mahomes, in McCaffrey, and in Kelsey for the 2020 fantasy football season. But again, you guys are going to see that once we get back to that 4th and 5th round, we're going to have to make some tougher choices at the running back position, and then especially at the wide receiver position, considering we don't have a single starting wide receiver. There's also the flex position that we have not addressed. Ideally, after the first 3 rounds, what I like to do is I like to have come out of those rounds with at least 2 running backs, maybe even 3 running backs, and if not, then running back and 2 wide receivers, or 2 running backs and 1 wide receiver. So, like I said, us going tight end and then quarterback here is definitely atypical. And, I don't want you guys to get the wrong message. I still don't endorse people going ahead and selecting a quarterback and tight end early. I realize at some point in time, value, gets to be incredible, but I wouldn't say that was really the case here with when we selected these guys. I think their value is probably right around where it should have been. And honestly, we reached with Patrick Mahomes, but this is more so for the sake of the experiment, showing you guys the potential drawbacks to doing something like this. and potentially how to fight out of it and go ahead and still put together a pretty solid roster, because, that's always our goal here with whatever mock draft at whatever position we do, with whatever scoring format we have, to go ahead and put the best roster available. Either go best value player or go ahead and try out some type of strategy and look at how things might play out. Let's go ahead and quickly look at some of these selections after our Patrick Mahomes pick, because in the third round afterwards, we had Juju Smith-Schuster come off the board, followed by DJ Moore, followed by Chris Carson, Adam Thielen, George Kittle, Allen Robinson, Lamar Jackson, Courtland Sutton goes off the board in the third round. That is shocking to me. I don't think that that's the best value pick right there, especially with a big question mark like a Drew Lock. Then you see Leonard Fournette, Todd Gurley. I would say end of the third round in a 12-team league, that's good value on Fournette and on Gurley. And now we've got the fourth round kicking off here with Melvin Gordon, Le'Veon Bell, Calvin Ridley, Odell, A.J. Brown, and Robert Woods. So a lot of those wide receivers that, are in that borderline wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 category with that breakout potential, the Ridleys, the Robert Woodses, maybe the A.J. Browns, Odells. We're not going to have our choice at those guys because, as you can see, they're flying off the board, and I anticipate that will continue to be the case. Keenan Allen just came off the board. I do think that's probably a little bit early for Keenan Allen. He's usually been someone that kind of falls in drafts because of the fact that Rivers isn't there, and you can honestly afterwards get him at a great value. But right now, in this point in the fourth round, with guys at the wide receiver position, like let's just go ahead and highlight a couple names, like a Tyler Lockett, like a Cooper Kupp still on the board, I would say that Keenan Allen may be a little bit of a reach. Even DJ Shark I'd probably take over Keenan Allen, who went 2 picks afterwards. The pick in between was DeAndre Swift. And man, I am shocked at the hype on these rookies right now. Look, by all accounts, the hype surrounding Clyde Edwards-Helaire is 100% warranted. But the only reason that's the case is because Damian Williams opted out of the season. That's not the case with Swift. That's not the case with Jonathan Taylor. And we don't play a game of ifs here. Right now, as it stands, Swift is not in the driver's seat in the running back position for the Detroit Lions. That is Kerryon Johnson. But we can go ahead and touch more on that in a little bit because we're back on the clock. Right now, we just got sniped with one of these players, James Conner. I was so hoping that he would fall to us. That isn't the case. Let's see what other guys are available at the running back position. It's not the best guys. I'm not going to lie to you here. Devin Singletary, Jonathan Taylor, who I just mentioned previously. But let's at least get one of our guys that I was hoping would fall to us and did, and that is Cooper Kupp. I like him with the Rams, honestly. I realize that a lot of people are low on him and saying, fade him and that Robert Woods will outproduce him. But I think at the end of the year, they probably finish with pretty similar type of outputs. And probably the determining factor will be the touchdown category, in which Kupp has outproduced Woods in the last several years. But let's go ahead now and select a running back because, right, this is the whole point of going ahead and trying out something like this and selecting. Oops, I accidentally added Jonathan Taylor to our queue. Did not want to do that. Let's go ahead and add David Montgomery, and hopefully we're going to be able to go ahead and land him in that next round. I took a bit of a chance. I selected Tyler Lockett instead of going running back. We'll see what happens. I still like the ceiling of a Tyler Lockett. He's someone that people, I would say, are kind of maybe a little bit afraid of with the emergence of a DK Metcalf. But I think at that point in time, good value on Tyler Lockett. I still believe he's going to be one of the favorite targets for Russell Wilson. So I'm all right with taking him there as our wide receiver 2. And again, keep in mind, we do have Travis Kelce, who's basically a wide receiver 1 playing as a tight end, especially on that Kansas City offense. Now, again, we'll see if this gamble pays off and if David Montgomery does drop to us. If I had to bet on it, I'd probably say, fat chance. but we'll see. There's still some other players, potentially a Mostert that we can go ahead and go with. If the value is good, we can go with an Ingram. We could go with the carry-on. Marlon Mack is someone that I really like. So there's a couple names to go with. I think at least one of those guys will be available to us. And things are starting to speed up here with these selections. And let's go ahead and get to look at the pick history again after our selection of Kupp and then Tyler Lockett. So we went Kupp, Lockett, and I do want to quickly mention, if James Conner wasn't selected with that pick right before us, our selection would have 1,000% been James Conner and then Cooper Kupp. I think both those guys at that point in time would have been incredible value. But instead, we went with Tyler Lockett, ensuring that wide receiver position. And then you see a bit of a run on tight ends with Mark Andrews, Zach Ertz, a couple picks later, Darren Waller. In between, Jonathan Taylor, Devin Singletary. And honestly, the thing I'm most shocked about is probably that DeAndre Swift went ahead of Jonathan Taylor, considering, the type of situation both those guys are in and the hype that Jonathan Taylor has had, the offensive line that he has. So honestly, that's the biggest shock to me so far in this, in this latest round. You see Singletary afterwards, Darren Waller, like we mentioned, T.Y. Hilton. Some people were a little bit nervous with that hamstring issue of his, but, couple of days go by, a week or so, and then he's cleared from that. So I still think Hilton has that wide receiver one upside. Landry, AJ Green. Talk about another wide receiver that's dealing with a bothersome hamstring situation. AJ Green falls in that category. At least right now it's nothing extremely serious. I still believe that a week or two after today that he'll be all right. But still, AJ Green is definitely someone that has a big asterisk next to their name because of the injury history. I like Devontae Parker as well as a good value pick. Then Stephon Diggs. I've been on record saying that with Stephon Diggs, I'd much rather take a chance on John Brown several rounds later than Stephon Diggs. I think they can very well go ahead and put together very similar types of seasons. Kareem Hunt afterwards to kick off that 6th round. Tyler Boyd, good value on Tyler Boyd considering, the question marks surrounding AJ Green. And now, unfortunately, like we predicted, guys like Kareem Hunt and David Montgomery go in that 6th round. So Kareem Hunt leads it off, followed by Boyd, Marvin Jones, Deshaun Watson, and David Montgomery afterwards. And for what it's worth, David Montgomery lasted longer than I expected. I'll be honest with you guys. Pretty much only 7 picks before we got a chance to go ahead and select again. So I'm a little bit surprised by that. I would have taken a chance on him, sooner rather than later. You see Ronald Jones afterwards, Marquise Brown, Will Fuller, Deebo Samuel, Tariq Cohen. But right now, I mentioned some of those guys. I mentioned a Raheem Mostert. I mentioned a Mark Ingram. And I said it before, I'm not the biggest Mark Ingram fan. But at this point in time, I think it's a good value pick. Same with Raheem Mostert. So honestly, that's what I'm probably going to do at this point in time. Let's see, there's some guys that I do like. Guys like a Julian Edelman as a potential flex. But right now, we need to go ahead and get some depth at that running back position. So let's go ahead, add Raheem Mostert. That's taken care of. Now we can go ahead and add Mark Ingram. Again, I don't necessarily feel good about this one, but I'll go ahead and add Ingram nonetheless. So we've got that taken care of. And we'll go ahead and afterwards make 2 more selections, I think, with some people having switched to auto pick. It'll be a little bit quicker. So the guys that I would like to get here is get some more wide receiver depth. So a guy like a Julian Edelman that I mentioned, someone like, let's switch to the wide receiver tab here and see what other names are on the board. Maybe a Michael Gallup, someone like a Christian Kirk, a Brandon Cooks, high ceiling type of guys, maybe a Hardman, but that would be really committing to that Kansas City offense there. John Brown is someone that I've mentioned, Emmanuel Sanders, that wide receiver 2 for the New Orleans Saints. I think he'll have plenty of opportunities. Right now, the highest remaining wide receiver that I have on my own personal board would be Julian Edelman. I doubt he makes it back to us, but we'll see. If he is there, I'm gonna go ahead and 1,000% make him my selection. But as it stands right now, so look, obviously we went with Mahomes and Travis Kelce with our second and third pick overall. I think that's probably one of the more apparent, potentially puzzling things. But there's some upside there. You get the stack. Obviously I would have preferred a Patrick Mahomes and a Tyreek Hill stack, but that wasn't really an option. Nonetheless, we took care of the tight end and quarterback position early on. But again, I'll continue to say this, especially in 12-team leagues. And this holds more truth when you add more and more teams, 14-team leagues, 16-team leagues. Go ahead, obviously assuming it's a one quarterback league, go ahead and wait on the quarterback position. Go ahead and wait on the tight end position, because in those leagues, that run on running backs especially, and also wide receivers, will be exasperated to an even larger extent. But again, here, we're more so focusing on what happens if you do happen to go quarterback and tight end early, how you can go ahead and come back from it, and what your roster could potentially look like. Now, I'll be honest with you guys, if we landed James Conner as our RB2, I think this would actually be a pretty decent roster that I would be actually excited about. But, I mean, you could argue that we got lucky with some of our other selections. A Cooper Kupp falling to us, even a Tyler Lockett, maybe a Mark Ingram in terms of value-wise. So it's always going to be a game of what ifs. What if this guy didn't get drafted 1 or 2 picks right before me? What if I selected someone else and then waited on another player? But you kind of go ahead and go pick by pick, and if things don't go your way, you got to readjust. That's why we always say it. Don't go into your drafts with a predetermined strategy, especially for snake drafts. That's one of the biggest disservices that you can go ahead and do for yourselves, because it really puts you behind the 8 ball, and it's going to cause you to reach on players. And again, even though here, I'm going to say it one last time, even though we selected Mahomes and Travis Kelce, especially with Mahomes, we could have gotten a better value pick in that 3rd round. Travis Kelce, you could argue we got it a good value, but still, we could have waited later on and still gotten a good tight end, a sleeper tight end if you want to go that way, with a Gesicki, with Jonnu Smith from Tennessee, with a Jack Doyle from the Colts. There's a long list of breakout tight ends that you could be targeting this year. But let's go ahead and look at this pick history here, because we focused on more so our roster, but what has happened since that selection of guys, of David Montgomery, or I should rather say of Mark Ingram. So we saw Kerryon Johnson, followed by Jordan Howard, Dak, Cam Akers, James White. Good value on James White in a PPR format at that point in time. Russell Wilson, Evan Ingram. I think good value on Evan Ingram. Higbee, Julian Edelman, unfortunately, goes off the board. So one of the guys that we were looking at, Gronk, Zach Moss, Cooks, Gallup off the board. Jamison Crowder off the board. Christian Kirk off the board. All right. We're going to have to make some magic happen here, folks, but that's all right. Let's look at the running back situation and see who is available. I've told you before, I love Marlon Mack. I'm going to go ahead and add him. I believe he's got a leg up right now on Jonathan Taylor. So let's go ahead and add one more running back, and then finally add our, I guess, 3rd wide receiver. We definitely need some depth there. Who's a guy that we can go ahead and land? I like a Emmanuel Sanders. Like I told you, I like a Deontay Johnson. Let's go ahead and take a chance on Sanders right now. So we go ahead, land Sanders, and for the most part, this roster is taken care of. There's no point in drafting a defense, drafting a kicker. That's a moot point. You're going to be most likely streaming at those positions, and we've gotten 2 spots on our bench already filled out. Afterwards, it's going to be slim pickings, and you're going to start seeing defenses, kickers go off the board. So let's just go ahead and quickly grade our roster. So we got Christian McCaffrey after obviously the 101. That was, you the no-brainer choice. And to some extent, it afforded us the flexibility to go ahead and wait on running back towards the third, fourth, fifth round. If there were some big name wide receivers like a Mike Evans available to us or a Chris Godwin in that second round, I would have gone there instead of going a Patrick Mahomes or a Travis Kelce to get better value. But just the way things broke out, we went with Kelce, went with Pat Mahomes to see how this thing would work out in the future. So obviously we've got three very high upside players at three different positions, which is nice. But afterwards, you see we pay the price. Cooper Kupp, Tyler Lockett, and afterwards our depth at that wide receiver spot, especially considering that we are at that extreme of having the first overall pick. So there's 24 selections in between our next pick. So that's the downside with having that selection. Afterwards, that depth really starts to go, and you could potentially see that drop off. I like the fact that we got Mostert. I like the fact that we got Mark Ingram. I think both those guys, we got good value picks. If Connor and Montgomery hadn't dropped to us, I'd be very ecstatic. I've said before, those are a couple of guys that are my guys for this year. But all in all, I'd probably give this grade or this team a grade of probably a B minus, maybe probably even a C plus. I'll be honest with you guys. I don't like my wide receiver depth. If something happens to Kupp or Lockett, we're in a bad place. And then the running back spot, I'm not all that sold on Mostert. He's going to have up and down games. Ingram, I'm okay with. I think we got it at a good value. Mac, I'm happy with. But again, if Mostert doesn't pan out, we don't have that much more depth. Sanders, there's a big drop off from Kupp to Lockett and Kupp, Lockett to Sanders. So yeah, honestly, I'm looking at a C plus to a B minus on this roster. Maybe in your eyes, you guys think the additions of Mahomes and Kelce kind of make up for it. Again, I'm going to continue to say it. To me, those are positions that can be addressed later on. Still, I think this roster could have been even dicier. So I think we did an all right job of coming back from going quarterback and tight end early. If we had gotten James Conner, I would say that this roster is, a B minus to a B. So going up by almost a full letter grade. But let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section. Did you agree, disagree? Hopefully this was helpful for some of you that might be considering doing a strategy like this, or just looking at the possibilities with that first overall pick in some bigger leagues. Let me hear it, along with any other fantasy questions you guys might have. And also a quick reminder again to go ahead, check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. Get yourself a copy of the 2020 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. And in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.